if brands can die a death of 1,000 cuts, then value and brands can be built by thousands and thousands of touch points.
How do brands today make sure they're delivering value?
Well, I think every brand is a little bit different on what that means. And I think value now is really in the eye of the beholder. Value could mean a deal for one person. It could mean remembering my name.
You guys are masters at taking a current menu, but just then having it be transformational and helping business results.
It is the one marketing piece that every single guest sees. It has to be creative that works, not to sound cliche, but like it has to work. It's got to do something.
Getting to the right question is what we both do.
Robin Blanchette is the CEO and founder of Norton Creative, a full-service advertising and marketing agency that specializes in restaurants and hospitality. Robin is a good friend to Lisa and was the first ever guest to feature on the Business of Joy podcast back in 2024. She rejoins the show to discuss the pivotal moments and memories that shaped her, including early beginnings, key influences, and business lessons she will never forget.
My parents bought my first car. It was $1,000 and it was a piece of crap. So
I was gonna say, was that the word you're really thinking? How do you help the team reignite the joy and that purpose?
we hire happy people. Our culture is really built like that anyway. Work hard, be nice. We've heard that 1,000 times, but you know what? Life is too short to be a jerk.
What are some of those conversations that you have to have with clients to get away from just the transacting and the deals?
Really and truly, that's what our jobs are as, sort of restaurant consultants, if you will. It's to say.
So our next guest was actually my first guest. And then she's actually my first second-time guest. And so we're going to talk a lot about the first times, the second times, and just how we evolve and how we grow as people and business leaders. So welcome to the show, Robin Blanchette.
Hi, thank you. Well, thank you for having me back.
Yeah?
Must have been okay the first time.
Well, I didn't know if I was going to mention this, but guess what?
What?
Do you remember that since you're the first one, the recording didn't work?
That's right. We had to do it over again. I forgot about that. Yeah.
So my first ever podcast was with Robin, and we did a Zoom, and the video didn't work.
That's right. You're like, would you mind doing this again? I'm like, no, and I've had to practice now. So
yes, and so being in a studio just makes it that more fun. So we've had fun getting to know the lighting and the seating and the first of all of these things as well. But go ahead and just you are the founder and CEO of
Norton Creative. We're based in Houston, Texas, and we're a full-service advertising agency focused solely on the hospitality restaurant industry.
And we actually had to look up the fact we were introduced by a friend, Billy Joe Wara, and it was right during the pandemic.
Yes, that's right.
And I want to jump into the first question, which is when it comes to value, I just feel like the value equation is so wonky. And how do brands today make sure they're delivering value?
Well, I think every brand is a little bit different on what that means. And I think value now is really in the eye of the beholder. I think if brands can die a death of 1,000 cuts, then value and brands can be built, right, by sort of a bunch of thousands and thousands of touch points. And, we've talked about this many times where value could mean a deal for one person. It could mean remembering my name. For another person, it could be lots of different things. And I know in research, you're trying to sort of boil it down to maybe one or two or five things even, but I think it's probably, many, many things that sort of create value for folks. And brands are really, I found now that they are starting to look a little bit more at their individual concept instead of, well, everybody's dealing now, so I should be dealing. So people, I'm starting to see folks be a little more careful about how they go about what the value equation means for their guest and for their brand.
Well, it's interesting that you mentioned the idea of just remembering somebody's name and the emotional connections, because, this whole idea of transactions to connections. But let me pretend to be a fly on the wall in one of your meetings.
Oh boy.
And you're trying to balance, because your role as the marketer, the advertiser, helping the brands get beyond the transactions. What are some of those conversations that you have to have with clients to get away from just the transacting and the deals?
Well, just like in any relationship, I really feel this is about getting to know not just the person, but what their real objectives are for the brand. And I think that's lost on a lot of folks. What are you really trying to achieve? Because sometimes it's like, oh, I need a poster, or I need a digital media buy, or I need a, media design project because my menu looks old. Well, what are you really trying to achieve? Or you have a profitability problem? Do you have taken too much price? You need to manage value through your menu. What do you need to do? So I think, like with any relationship, really, it's just getting to know, the brand and the people. So that's really what a lot of the conversation, it's more traditional, and traditional agencies, it's very similar in that you're just looking for discovery. You're just trying to be curious.
Well, the funny thing is, it just reminded me, Robin, of a funny story at Frito-Lay, because it's all about getting to the right question.
Right.
Which, we talked about even just before we hit record. Getting to the right question is what we both do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But at Frito, you'll laugh, is if somebody came to say, hey, we need some focus groups, right? And
why?
It's the why. What are you trying to learn? But we got to the point, and I'm not kidding, we actually joked about this. We would say, would you like fries with that?
Right, exactly.
Because
it's like we need a focus group. Why?
Why? And instead of being, I think the translation, and again, I love having these conversations because I don't think of it in the same way, but it's like if you're order taking, if you think about that fries example, and would you like fries with that? That's just an order taker.
That's right.
And so when
it's transactional.
Yeah. So then when the client says, hey, I need a new menu, that's like, you should start doing that. Would you like fries with that?
Right. I don't know how well that would go over, but I like the idea. I think it's more really for us, there's a lot of questions. Are you changing out new food? Are you trying to, build profit into your menu? Are you trying to get folks to order items that are faster to get out of the kitchen? I mean, there's a million questions, and really and truly, that's what our jobs are as, sort of restaurant consultants, if you will. It's to say, what do you really want to try to get out of this? And I say even to our team, you were specifically asking about what do you say in your meetings. I say to the team before we even go into a meeting, how do you want people to feel when they walk out of here? Do you want them to feel like you got them, you understood, we got the project, we're making, there might be some details to follow up on, but really it's all about, so it's not a transactional, you're building a relationship, hopefully for the long term.
And I think that's so powerful when you can actually, I don't know many leaders that are maybe on the service side that actually have the precision to say, how do I want them to feel at the end of this meeting? And I think that's so powerful. Where did that come from in your background, do you think?
That's a great question. We spent a lot of time on tools like the Enneagram and things like that. It's sort of the new Myers-Briggs, right? And I think we've got a company that's, as a company as a whole, is an Enneagram 2, which is the helper. And I think we're just kind of built that way. I'm personally built that way. How can I be of service? How can I make sure that, it's not just like, here's the scope, here's what we're going to do for you, here's how much money it's going to cost, but like, what are you going to get out of it? Because you talk a lot about the business of joy and being joyful, but like, that's a part of our life. I mean, we're spending a lot of time at work.
Right.
And you want to work with people you like, people that get you, that help you be a hero back at your office, all those, there's lots of things to it outside of just let me send you what we just did for you. Cause it's the transaction part.
It is. And so when you think about, cause you see my posts and we talk a lot about this, but even this Energizer Bunny, this joyful Energizer Bunny sometimes has a bad day, right? And we all do.
Yes.
And so when you think about in your world, how do you remotivate your team? Because there's going to be those times where, maybe the client doesn't appreciate, or maybe there's too many revisions or more revisions. Yeah. And how do you help the team like reignite the joy and that purpose?
Well, first of all, it's really a learning process. Everything we do is about getting better, not, shame on you. So our culture is really built like that anyway. so usually when I talk to the team, if we're frustrated or we're having a hard time getting it right or whatever, it's really about like, how can we learn from this next time? How can we make it more efficient next time? And I don't know, we hire happy people. I mean, I think that the hiring process is really important because toxic people kind of weed themselves out pretty fast in our organization. Like we don't play that here, and so we just try to get better. That's the job.
I think that's fascinating because, you hear about hiring tools and all that, especially in the restaurant business or in any company.
Sure.
But I think I think part of that, you talked about the Enneagram 2s, but I think that chemistry, not only with your clients, but the people you hire.
Right. I mean, work hard, be nice. Like we've heard that 1,000 times, but you know what? Life is too short to be a jerk or to deal with that. Like we're all here for the same reason. We're all trying to, get things done and, bring your brand to life. I mean, we've all kind of gone through this personal brand process, especially when you've been in the industry for 30 years. Mm-hmm. It's really about trying to, help people reach their potential. And if you care about others reaching their potential, or if you care about others at all, quite frankly, you want them to have the opportunity, want them to reach their potential. And we kind of feel that way about our brands too, where it's like, look, if we don't only just want our CMO or our, director of marketing client to, be a big hero and do great work and drive sales and all those things. But, we want our team to be able to reach their potential too. And the only way to do that is to have experiences that teach you.
Well, and I think that's such a great insight, Robin, because I think in today's world, it's immediate gratification. It's,
right.
I need to get to that next level. I want to get promoted. I want the new responsibility. And you have to go through those ups and downs to be able to grow, right?
You do. And I think I will say, and there's been an enormous amount of conversation and talk about AI. But I will say that and you and I have talked about this, you've posted about it, I've read about you talking about it, that this analog world is becoming more and more popular. Certainly our daughters are knitting and cross-stitching and getting away from their phone and trying to, this, our daughter is a soccer player and she's outside trying to touch grass. And I think those things are, becoming more and more important as we rely too heavily on digital efficiency, if you will.
Well, and that whole analog trend, I always say for every trend, there's the counter trend.
Sure.
And so we'll dive into the AI in just a minute. But what I was thinking about is the analog, literally Gen Z, and it's been around for a while, but of course Gen Z had to name it the analog bag.
Right.
And the fact of, instead of having your phone, even when you're having some downtime at home, it's just an organized bag that's a book, it's a journal, it's knitting. And I think that those human connections, all generations are needing them, and they're really feeling it more just because of the overall stress, I think.
I agree.
Yeah,
I agree with that wholeheartedly.
Well, when you think about one question, I actually did go back and I went back and I listened to the podcast we did originally. And there's one question, Robin, that I did not ask you because I was not on this road yet. And it was this, what was your very first job?
Like first before W-2,
exactly.
Like somebody paying me for work.
Yeah.
The very first job I ever had was a paper route in my neighborhood for the Houston Suburban Journals. I think it was the free one that goes out. And they paid me, I don't remember how much it was because I was 11 years old. I was a kid. And then I babysat and did other things and worked at the mall and did all the things that we all did back then as teenagers. But yeah, that was my very first job. It was dark outside. I can't believe my parents let me do that. Well, I'll be honest.
Well, but I love hearing that because I can see little Robin. And, for those that you may or may not know, Robin and I actually grew up very close together.
Like adjacent neighborhoods.
Yeah, adjacent neighborhoods. So who knows? Maybe you delivered to my house. Who knows?
Yeah.
Who knows?
That would have been a busy street to cross.
Oh.
I don't remember doing that, but maybe.
Maybe. But why is it that you think our parents just set us free like that? And today parents are so much more protective.
Well, that's a big question. I mean, I think there's a lot of answers to that question. I certainly, as a parent, knew all the things that I did without my parents knowing. So I'm much more of a helicopter parent than my parents could even imagine. I mean, it's true about sort of riding our bikes miles away from home. I mean, I grew up on a bayou in Houston, and there were stables and horses and all these things back there. And we just got into all kinds of trouble and all kinds of really dangerous things. Like, I think our parents they grew up being free in that way. And so they're like, well, I want them to be free. And now I don't know. There's media influences and too much news, 24-hour news, and things that keep me up at night all the time. So maybe that's why.
Well, and I have the conversations with my kids, which is, did you get to do this? They had the lemonade stand when they were growing up.
Same.
And I do feel like we have to not bubble wrap kids so much.
Yeah, sure.
And so that's one of my messages to everybody listening is if you have kids of any age, it's like, take the bubble wrap off. Even if you have grown 20 somethings, take the bubble wrap off, because that's how that's how you grow and you learn.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you for sharing that, because I did not realize I did not get that answer way back when.
It's a great question. I think it definitely, it kind of, those early jobs really kind of stuck with me always. I mean, you just did that. I mean, now I say, gosh, I've been really working since I was 11 or like in the mall since I was 14 or whatever. That's a long time. And I obviously really love it, or I wouldn't keep doing it.
Well, what do you think when you go back to that little 11-year-old Robin and that paper route? What do you think the hard lessons were that maybe you don't really think about, but because that's hard, 11 years old and a paper route?
I mean, it never even occurred to me that I wasn't going to get up in time for work, or it was dark outside. I remember riding my bike in the dark. So there was just an assumption that this is part of life, is that we work like this. You're responsible, you get, you show up. And I think showing up is probably the biggest thing that has stuck with me. And that means not just for the job, but it builds trust. You show up for your friends, you show up for your family. Like, there's no question about it. I will be there,
Well, imagine if, younger children, whether they're Gen Alpha, I guess now that, they're the Gen Z, the little ones. So Gen Z is 13 to like 28. So Gen Alpha, in the sense of, we have to find ways for that generation, Gen Alpha, to grow up with those trust and confidence and accountability and showing up. And I think it's different. I think volunteering is awesome. I did that when I was a kid. My parents volunteered like everything.
Yes.
And so we did that too. But I think there is something different about having that accountability to show up. Yeah. And I think sports get close to that. But even that's probably not the same. Do you think?
Well, it's a definitely being part of a team, but it's, you just show up for people. I mean, and that's where all that comes from. I mean, certainly a team, like, my son is in theater, our daughter's in soccer, like, they can't play without you. Like, they can, I guess, but they really are counting on you. And I feel that way in any team. I've committed myself to this team at Norton, for instance. These are my people. And you know what? We have to hire people like that. And we sometimes ask the question, how'd you buy your first car? Because that's a really good question too. Not that it kicks you out of the process, but it does kind of help understand somebody, what their true character is, and I can honestly say my parents bought my first car. It was $1,000 and it was a piece of crap. So
I was going to say, was that the word you're really thinking?
But it was, how, and what was it? There's just good questions, I think, in hiring people to understand who they are, what their character is, how they'll show up for others. And I feel that way about our clients. Like, gosh, answer the phone. Don't just respond to a text,
Well, and it's funny, I just thought of this too, Robin, is that how many times do I just call you instead of texting?
I know. I'm like, it's Lisa.
Yeah, and it's funny because we're so trained to text people now, and I just feel like most times I get you, which is awesome.
I know, I love that.
But I have to go back to the car because I think that is so fascinating. I'm going to have to add that to my list of ongoing questions. But my first car, I guess I was the youngest of three, so I always had hand-me-down cars. Yeah. And I just remember one was a Monte Carlo, which was my brother's car. And it was one of those ones, if you're younger, you won't even know what I'm talking about. But it had the vinyl roof that was, those cars, and it was peeling off.
Yes.
But the first car that we bought, my sister and I painted and did little crafty things in college. And we literally created, you'll love this, a company called Creative Artists of Richmond. CAR.
Wow. Look at you.
And that was, we both worked, and that's how we bought our first car. But it was a blue Mustang. And
that's pretty cool.
Well, we went to SMU, but it was a 1970 car. So it was a found on road dead kind of Mustang.
Oh.
Not the cool,
Yikes.
It was not old enough to be cool, and it was not new enough to be good. And they called it the Kmart Blue Light Special. Look Kmart up if you don't even know what I'm talking about, right? But they had the Kmart Blue Light Special.
I mean, it's humbling, really, if you think about it. It really does help you in life to drive around in a car like that.
Well, and I'm at SMU, and there were some nice cars at SMU, and that car ended up only going backwards when it died.
It's finally done.
It's finally done. But I want to actually move into, we talked about kind of the relationships and the partnerships and all of that. And what I love about getting to know you, and I feel like I've known you my whole life, even though it's only been like 4 years or something, but you worked on the client side.
I did.
So you were a marketer.
Yes.
And then now you're on the agency side.
I am.
And so what about being on the marketing side do you think sets you up for success as owning your own agency, being on the other side of the table?
Well, one of the reasons that I started Norton with a team, it wasn't just me by myself, started with the team was because we were not getting what we needed from our agencies. Now, we had great agencies, really creative people, but I was really, as a brand side, operator side, CMO, your focus is sales, traffic, and profit. Like, your job is to make sure there are butts and seats, and the kind of butts and seats you want, and all the other things that we all know. But
you worked for big brands.
I did work for, I'm very proud of my experience, but the experiences all kind of led me to this, really, because the way in which we started Norton was, we're going to solve the white space, or try to find the white space. That's what we do as marketers anyway, right? So I was like, look, all these agencies are so great, but they're really focused on telling the brand story, really important, but really important to stay in business is, to make sure you're driving sales also. So there's a lot of components to that. So most of what our work is today at Norton is set up to say, look, it's not just a pretty menu design. We have to drive profitability, and we got to build the architecture right. Customer journey work is the same way. What's happening in the four walls? Where are people seeing messages that are going to help drive profit? Things like that. And that's kind of, I think, what's made us grow, is because we're able to solve a lot of problems, not just the brand storytelling, which is also really important. We do too.
Well, it reminds me of our mutual friend, Greg Creed, when it's sales overnight, brand over time. Yeah, and so you have to do both, right? Because the branding is critical for that storytelling, and then the sales overnight is the menu engineering. Yeah. I will kind of brag on you for just a minute, Robin, because what is fascinating, just in the overlap of some of the people we've worked with, you guys are masters at taking a current menu and that might have a lot of things on it, and being able to reimagine a menu, not deleting anything, but just then having it be transformational in helping business results. Literally didn't change the back of the house, didn't change the front of the house, simply arranging your current items in a more logical way. So how does all that work? That's pretty powerful stuff.
Well, it really starts with, again, the objectives and building that relationship, trying to understand what somebody's trying to do. Sometimes people just want a new design, and they want to use their brand standards and just refresh. But always we will work in profit work. Can we have access to data? Can we have access to sort of your, understanding your PMix and all the other things. And, a lot of the really giant chains do this, pretty masterfully. But the goal really is to, and I heard you and Melissa talking about this as well, is this blend of art and science. And it has to have, it has to be creative that works, not to sound cliche, but like it has to work. It's got to do something. And so that process, we've got, external partners that help us data wise. But the team is also experienced in bringing a brand to life through a menu. And you know what I notice happens a lot is that even before a brand has decided to tell a new story, they're like, we just need to fix our menu. We just need to fix our menu. I'm like, okay, well, so the brand will start to come to life in the new design and in the new work. And it typically will start to lead the brand work because it is the one marketing piece that every single guest sees. It's the one touch point. It's got to be right.
Well, and one of the things that you couldn't be more correct on the fact is that you've got to get the menu right. But I love the fact that the menu can lead the overall branding.
Yes.
I mean, that's pretty powerful.
It's very uncommon. I mean, it's in traditional advertising and marketing. They would tell you, we got to start with insights, then we got to, and that is a, pretty typical sort of stage gate kind of process. But, we're in the restaurant industry. We don't have the luxury all the time of 18 months of work. We've got to get in there, make things happen, especially since COVID. We've got teams that know how to kind of get scrappy and go make things work fast.
Yeah, what have you done for me yesterday, right? What were sales of yesterday is really kind of what we all face for sure. Yeah. But when you think about even just the appreciation that you have for the clients having lived in their shoes, like what is a message that maybe to other agency people or folks to say, wow, when you sit in that chair on the client side, what's so different versus being on the service side?
Well, one thing I think we forget and I don't even know on the agency side, I feel like sometimes I'm still on both sides in many ways. But I think we forget sometimes that marketing teams are working cross-functionally every single day. So they're working with supply chain people and accounting people. They're working and they're getting pulled by all these different teams. I mean, in many instances, I work for a seafood concept for a long time, and the supply chain really ran in many ways because, we don't know what the catch might be, so like it's going to run the marketing and it's also going to be very difficult. So my supply chain partner and I were locked at the hip. Whereas in other brands, it wasn't so much. I mean, there was unlimited supply of mozzarella sticks or something, you know what I mean? So it's very different.
Yeah, I think that's so different too from packaged goods because, growing up, I grew up in kind of the Frito-Lay PepsiCo world. Yep. And while the Pepsi side is very much a marketing driven organization and distribution, Frito was all about cross-functional teams.
Right.
And I had not thought of that in a while, but yeah, as a marketing team, you are kind of like the traffic cop across all of those different functions. But I don't know that always, and I'm just going to put it out there, I don't know that marketing people always get the credit for that skill set to be able.
Agree.
And it's getting the left brain, right brain, everybody kind of working on the same page, right? And I think marketing people maybe don't get the due credit on that.
Well, I agree. I mean, it is sort of this, like a traffic cop's a good way to describe that, but that is very different than being on the service side or the agency side, because I think like sometimes we'll be on a call about, I don't know, menu or something, and we'll say, look, we don't know what your supply chain situation looks like. I can tell you this is, if you move these things around, you're going to be more profitable, but I don't know, you could run out of this. Like so sort of being able to say, it's what we were talking about earlier, is being able to say, I got you, I understand, because look, you as a marketing lead are going to have to go figure that part out. Like, I just need to be clear. We don't know what your supply chain looks like.
But I think that says a lot about your company too, because the art and science, which of course I love, as I said on Melissa, that's the love language.
That's right.
Art and science, because that's what I do every day as well.
Yeah.
But the fact that you can kind of with confidence say, if you make this menu change, I'm going to sell more X, Y, Z.
Yeah.
But helping the team connect the dot, like, oh, go check with that. And in my world, the example is if we're doing in-store restaurant testing, let's say, and we're doing iPads or we're even sending an email out, my thing is make sure your customer service team knows, because if they call and like, I have a question about the survey, that's who's going to get it. And so we always try to think, it's anticipating and thinking a step or two ahead.
Well, again, as we've talked about, it's showing up for people, and that's how you show up for people. It's not just about providing you this work that we did. We've got to be able to add our value, which that's what our value, I believe, is being able to help you do more than just execute this menu.
Well, and it's being that total partner. I know that sounds cliche as well, but I think that's so true, because even in my world with research, I think there is a difference between what I say is a research report versus kind of that. It's like, that's the data. And I'll even have companies come back and say, hey, we have this other report. Can you take a look and help us add value? So I think it's a gift that partnership doesn't happen all the time. Well, my other question, since we're talking about art and science, as you know, I post a lot about AI, and just, now we talked about the analog as well. But I came up with this thought of the house that AI built. And so there are people that are kind of what I say is in the basement, which is they use AI, but they don't want anybody to know about it. And then I find myself in what I call kind of the study. And what that is there's so much, there's never ending answers or never ending questions. And you kind of get stuck in the library of the study. And it's like, oh, look, I can ask this, I can ask that, I can do that. And then the creative studio is kind of another level. And so in the world of agency, and we've talked about this, it's this unique balance of, you've got to be able to maybe use it, not necessarily to be faster, but how do you use it to make it be better in a new way? So that's a big setup. Just to say, how are you guys grappling with all of the AI?
Well, we really use it for efficiency purposes. We are a creative agency, and that's using our critical thinking skills, and the answers that we have aren't always in the data, right? In fact, a lot of times they're not in the data. It is a creative pursuit. It's like that. I always butcher this lovely Henry Ford quote about, if I asked people what they wanted, they would have said a faster horse. And so for us, we're looking to create a car, not a faster horse. So the car doesn't exist or didn't exist. And so we went through this during the internet. When the internet came about in my career, I remember thinking like, it may be the best thing or big thing, or may not be. And we'll see what happens. It's certainly, the internet has certainly helped us communicate faster and made us more efficient, but it hasn't necessarily, created a new plate of food, or whatever the idea might be. And I'm not saying it can't or it won't, but I still believe that an actual human hug, makes a difference in people's lives.
Oh, well, and thank goodness, right? That's the whole human connection that I think is true. But yes, you got that quote right. Okay. I love that quote.
I do too.
Yeah. And I do think it's an interesting analogy, because I'll tell you, this will date me, but one of my first advertising jobs, I actually was asked if I actually wanted a computer on my desk.
Yes.
And so not everybody even had a computer on their desk.
Same.
And again, if that's a mystery to you, there was a time where a laptop.
How did you talk to somebody? You called them on the phone.
Well, that is, oh my God, I could go down a rabbit hole on that one, but I won't. We'll save that for a drink afterwards, right? We'll save that.
Exactly.
But it is fascinating where the technology, Gen Z and Gen Alpha, they're going to grow up with AI. And so how they use it today, is it productivity versus creativity?
Right.
And I think that's just going to be a never ending question for the next several years, I would say.
I don't know how it solves for something that doesn't exist yet, but maybe it will. We'll see.
Well, it's like it can't create that plate of food.
That's right.
It really can't.
We still have to feed ourselves until there's a pill for that.
Yeah. Oh, don't even put that out in the universe. Oh my goodness. Well, I want to ask, kind of with our last couple minutes, is when you think about this journey you've had over 3 decades with the restaurant industry, a big sigh, a big sigh. I know, when you have to change decades. Is there one thing that you would have done differently as you had set up Norton? And I know you had mentioned earlier this idea of how you started and what your offerings were, and then how you are today. So is there some big thing that you would have really done differently?
I mean, the first part of my career was in media, which is different than a creative side. It's the media buying side. It's the working with networks, things like that. I was so tired of it. I mean, I really was. When I started Norton, I was like, we are never going to do that. And so I would have started as a full service agency from the beginning. And the reason is not so much because I want to do this or want to do that or didn't want to do it. It was more because when people need help and they need support, and restaurants are like, I really need to get my message out there, and we can't help them, that just absolutely kills me. Like, I don't like to say no. I want to say yes, and whatever that thing is. And so it really frustrated me for the beginning part of the company that I wasn't able to help people with all the things. I mean, obviously we have to draw the line, somewhere, but I would have probably started as a full service agency and just sort of dealt with it,
Well, but it's what goes back to how we started the conversation. It's like the first time, the second time, and the do-overs.
Yeah.
That's it, right? Because the first time you started your own company, you're like, oh, never. But then you realize maybe that's something I can help my clients with.
That's right. And a lot of people would call me because they knew that was my background. So they were like, oh, tell me what you think about this or think about that. And I'm like, yeah, but we don't do that. I mean, now we do obviously do it and we have a team, but it's at the time I didn't want to start off that way. So yeah, live and learn. And, this just goes to show you, it doesn't matter what you're doing. You're always learning something new. So
yeah, which goes back to our first and second chances and all of those things.
Yeah.
But is there one moment that stood out that was like a surprising, and it could be surprising, like, wow, I actually accomplished this, or wow, that was way harder than I thought.
In the company?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I don't want to state the obvious, but we did meet around COVID. I will say that was that week, and the day we had to let people go was the absolute worst day of my entire career. Hands down, I could literally tear up talking about it. It was horrible. It was the worst day of my career. It was that Friday after the restaurant industry got shut down. And it wasn't because of our revenue stopping or people not being able to pay their invoices. It was my whole world are invested in this industry. All of my industry friends, my people, my husband is in the restaurant industry. My, all the people that worked at Norton that we had to let go so they could go get benefits. There's just heartbreaking doesn't even cover it. And I know everyone else feels the same way. So I hate to be so obvious about it, but I wasn't prepared for that. And I think I'm a little more prepared for, those kinds of crises now. I mean, marketing in the restaurant industry kind of prepares you a little bit because, gosh, all of a sudden you're out of a product. And then what are you going to do? You got to shift gears. So I knew how to shift gears, but I've never had to see the heartbreak on the people I love's faces like that.
Well, and it's that human toll.
Yeah.
It's the human toll.
Yes.
Well, and I think everybody can,
Yes.
it takes me back for sure. Yeah. Well, I want to kind of end on a couple of new traditions.
Okay.
I'm creating, right?
Uh-oh.
So new traditions.
Okay.
So the first is very quickly, I have these 3 cards.
Okay.
And this is rapid fire. So we're not going to overthink them, right?
Right. Uh-oh.
So pick one and then hand it back to me. And then I'm going to ask you.
Oh,
oops. There you go. Okay. So you ready for this fun question?
I think.
What superpower would you choose for a day?
To be able to eat anything I want without gaining weight. That's the first thing
Can I high five that?
I guess.
And I know there may be some people out there that cannot relate to that, but I know I sure can. That is a fantastic.
First thing that came to mind. That's ridiculous.
It is not at all ridiculous at all.
The 80s. We had some bad diet culture. I don't know what to say.
Yes, we did. Okay, so my next tradition is I have this very cool joy journal, right?
Yes.
And a previous guest wrote a question for you.
Oh my goodness.
All right.
Okay.
And so these are also rapid fire, right? So who has had the biggest impact on your life, and what would you want them to know?
Oh man. I would say probably my mother. she became a nurse when she was 63.
Wow.
And she was a hospice nurse for 20 years until she retired. And I think I would want her to know how much of an influence she's had on my ability to keep trying new things and staying young, even as she grows older. And just having, I mean, she is completely filled with joy. She is, not to just finish on joy, but I will say she's completely filled with joy and hope in life. And I love that. It's true. Anybody that would know Linda would say the same thing about her. But I want her to know the incredible influence that she's had on my life. That if I could only be half the person she is, that'd be a win.
Well, and it's clear that then all that hope and joy, she obviously shared that with you, though. So that's fabulous. Yeah. And then our very, very last tradition is you get to write a question in the book for the next guest.
Okay.
All right.
Do I get to know who the next guest is?
No.
Oh, okay. Okay.
It's a surprise.
Okay.
Yeah. And you can just quickly write a question. And my book matches your shirt.
I love it.
Okay. Awesome. Well, and with that, we will call it a wrap.
I love it. Thank you so much for having me. This is so fun.
It's always so fun. The time goes by. But thank you for being such a special part of my life. And I think you're the best. And I just appreciate all that you've done for me over a short period of time, even though I feel like I've known you my whole life.
Well, I feel the same way.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, have a good one.